The Z-10 helicopter flies out for China in War Thunder. Does it deliver? Let's find out. The backstory behind the Z-10 helicopter could almost be a James Bond movie. It's full of espionage, sanctions busting, secret business contracts, misinformation campaigns, and lawsuits. I'm only going to gloss over some of the highlights, but if you're interested, go do some digging online, because it's quite the ride. Anyway, back in the 1980s, China recognized that they needed to add some dedicated attack helicopters to their order of battle, and they started a handful of projects towards that end. This included acquisition of some modified civilian helicopters that were used for developing tactics and everything, along with several attempts to purchase some foreign-built attack choppers, such as the Mi-28 and the AH-1 Cobra, along with a series of models in the Z-9 family, used as stopgap measures to get some attack helicopters of any kind into service quickly. Well, the Z-10 itself had a deeply troubled development, and the project got reassigned several times before finally ending up with CAIC, the Shanghai Aircraft Industries Corporation. The engine was changed several times, and in the end, the Wujiao 9 turboshaft that it eventually got was considered a bit underpowered, but it proved far more reliable and it used no foreign-built parts, which ended up being a pretty important factor. The prototype first flew sometime in 2003, and the helicopter went through a further decade of development. As problems were fixed, the weapon system was refined, and features were updated through a process of in-service testing by operational military units. The final design eventually entered service either in late 2012 or early 2013, and it's estimated that around 200 of them are currently flying. A modified version of the helicopter has also been offered to Pakistan, and according to Western sources, the Z-10 has been produced in several variants, showing improvements and small differences as the production run has continued. What we get in War Thunder is the baseline model of Z-10. This is an attack helicopter in Rank 7 of the Chinese tech tree, at battle rating 11.0. This is currently the top Chinese helicopter in the game. The sensor suite is fully featured, with basically everything except for a radar mast. It has a full CCIP, a thermal imager with an amazing optical zoom, an auto tracker, missile approach warning, laser and radar warning receivers, and a night vision system that'll work in the third-person view. The only real deficiency is the limited number of countermeasures. For weapons, the Z-10 has a chin-mounted cannon turret and can carry a pretty wide selection of external ordnance, including rocket pods, air-to-air missiles, gun pods, and anti-tank missiles. Amusingly, the weapon system contains a CCIP for dumb bombs, even though the Z-10 doesn't carry any. The air-to-air missile it gets is the excellent TY-90. This is an all-aspect infrared-guided missile with ECCM, 20 Gs of pull, and reasonable range. Basically, and in short, this is one of the most effective helicopter-launched air-to-air missiles in the game. The entry-level anti-tank missile is the AKD-9. This is a medium-range tank missile with 800mm of armor pen. It's got a tandem heat warhead that isn't as strong as some of the others. It's incredibly slow, but it does support lock-on after launch, and it uses a ballistic flight trajectory. Overall, it's a medium-performance weapon at top tier. The upgraded anti-tank missile is the AKD-10. This thing has an amazing 1400mm of armor penetration, a 6 kg tandem heat warhead, and long-ish range for an anti-tank missile. It still supports the lock-on after launch, and it uses the ballistic flight model just like the AKD-9, but it still has a very slow flight speed of only 345 meters per second, which can be an issue. The flight performance of the Z-10 has some high points as well as some low points. It's got reasonably good agility, and it can swing itself around to change direction pretty well, owing to its comparably light weight, and it's got a really good cyclic response. It banks well, and it rights itself from a bank pretty well, which can be important for below radar level flying, as you're trying to get in a position after you spawn in, and you're out zigzagging between trees, little hills, and buildings and stuff. It accelerates good in level flight, but I don't know, sometimes it feels like it has problems bleeding its forward momentum off. And, like, for example, if you engage the hover mode in forward flight, it feels like it gains more altitude than necessary while it's slowing down, but that might just be perception bias. The big issue, though, is the top speed, which isn't great. With a listed top speed of only 260 kilometers an hour, this is one of the slowest high-tier helicopters in the game. Now, while it can exceed its listed maximum in level flight, so can most other helicopters, and it's still slower than most of the other top-tier competitors. It might not seem like something that matters, but situationally it can have a meaningful impact, especially if you want to try and take this thing into PvE mode. The last thing to mention with the flight performance is that it suffers from some really sloppy directional stability in anything but a flat hover or prolonged forward flight. Small changes in the collective can totally throw off your aim, and it tends to bob around a little bit more than I'm used to when doing maneuvers, which can make it a little more difficult to guide weapons in if you're not using the auto tracker. Taking the Z-10 out into ground battles can be a bit of a tricky balancing act, just like most of the other helicopters at top tier, but there are some unique quirks. Now, to state the obvious, in the current top tier meta, helicopters are incredibly vulnerable to SPAA. Getting within 6 or 7 kilometers of the battlefield is very risky if there's even one competent SPAA unit up. And compounding the usual risks are the fact that the anti-tank missiles on the Z-10 are significantly slower than any of the anti-air missiles you'll be going up against. If you get spotted before you already have a missile outbound to the SPAA, you're quite likely just screwed. Now, because of the Z-10's slow missiles, it can take like 20 to 30 seconds for your shots to reach the targets, assuming you can safely spot some, and that's a very long time in War Thunder ground battles. Targets can move or get taken out, get behind cover, pop smoke, you can get intercepted, SPAA can find you and take a shot while your missile is outbound on some other target, so on and so on. The point I'm getting at is, despite the generally good performance of the Z-10, try to maintain realistic expectations from what you're going to get out of it. I personally find that some helicopters tend to do better on different maps than others, and this one was no different. If you can find a hiding spot to shield yourself at long distance behind a hill or something from SPAA that are staying in their spawn, but still have some visibility into the flank of the advancing enemy team, like from, say, 8 kilometers out, that'll be the best place for you, even if it is far away. Remember, your weapons have good range, even if it does take a while for them to hit. A special note about the footage I'm showing, I'm not personally great at remembering where to hit all the different tanks to target their ammo and crew, so you'll frequently see me doing a double tap shot to increase the odds of a kill. If you're better at ammo racking, you probably won't have to do that, especially with the AKD-10's insane penetration. The last thing I'll say is that in PvE battles, well, it's kind of pointless to bring the Z-10. It's too slow, both in its own speed compared to other helicopters at the top tier, and the flight time of its weapons, in order to try and compete with, like, all the Ka-52s and stuff. And by this point, you've maxed out the helicopter tech tree, so you don't need the RP, and it won't be an efficient way to grind Silver Lions, so skip PvE with the Z-10. Visually, this is a pretty modern and advanced-looking attack helicopter. That angular split between the upper and lower fuselage kind of reminds me of the cancelled AH-66 Comanche, but with its stub wings and conventional tail, it's still got a unique combination of design elements. You can get a camo skin for it on the marketplace, but personally, I prefer the default solid black. Landing the Z-10 is a little weird, and it never feels comfortable for me. It's got wheels, so it's going to roll around a little bit after touching down unless you hard lock the brakes, and it's still got some wobbling instability issues right before touchdown. It's not the hardest helicopter to land, nor the easiest, But the good news is that the gear's pretty strong, and I haven't yet run into any issues snapping the tail wheel off or anything, even if I come in kinda sideways. To close out on the Z-10 attack helicopter. This thing has an excellent sensor and weapon system, with good thermals and a powerful optical zoom. Its weapons are quite strong with good penetration, and the AKD-10 in particular hits very hard. And its air-to-air potential is really good, with the TY-90 being one of the best helicopter missiles in the game. However, it's slower than most of the other top-tier helicopters. Its anti-tank missiles have a very long flight time. It maxes out at 8 anti-tank missiles, which is a bit less than most of its competitors. It carries an embarrassingly low number of countermeasure charges compared to other top-tier helicopters, and it has almost no meaningful armor protection, making it pretty vulnerable. The final verdict on the Z-10 is that it's basically a glass cannon. The weapons are potent, but you're vulnerable when using them, and the top-tier helicopter meta is rough to begin with. When it works, it's gonna work well, but if people find you, it's usually bad news. As always, thanks for watching.